Hello, welcome to Local Anesthetic Podcast, the most trusted name in local news. My name is Alex, and, well, normally I say joining us via Skype is Rob, but those of you who have listened to this podcast for a long time will know that there are occasions when I've had to record on my own, and this is one such occasion because Rob is off to Canada for 2 weeks. We were meant to record this evening, and I spoke to him this evening, and he sounds absolutely terrible. He's come down with something. I don't think he was making it up, but I feel bad for him because he's flying in a couple of days, and you don't want to be going away when you're not feeling well. But he isn't feeling well, so I'm sure we all wish him a speedy recovery. But what we agreed to do is something quite different, because what's going to happen is I am going to record an episode on my own, a kind of mini episode, and Rob is going to record a mini episode when he's feeling better and when he gets the chance, and we will stagger those releases of those episodes over the next couple of weeks. And Rob, I think, is due to return something like the 10th or 11th of July, and we'll be recording pretty quickly after that, so there should be an episode up, another episode in, 2 to 3 weeks with the two of us. But at the moment, it's just left to me to get on with it and, inform our listeners of some local news. Now, you will know that last week we had a listener story special. Well, we've had so many listener stories filling up our inbox that we have had no choice but to continue on with the listener stories. And so this episode from me will all be listener stories. And my understanding is that the episode that Rob records will all be listener stories as well. It's amazing how many we've had. And I think last week I might have included one from my father, and I do actually have another one. I mean, he does count as a listener. I mean, I don't actually know how often he listens, but he does send me stories for the podcast when he sees them. My parents live down in Dorset, so he regularly peruses the local paper down there, which is called the Bournemouth Echo, otherwise known as the Daily Echo. And this is a great story. It's by Jade Graspy from the 18th of June 2019. And by the way, I am recording for the fastidious amongst you on Thursday, the 27th of June. Now, this is a story. Dorset police tweet all calls made to 999 and 101 in 12-hour period. We've had quite a few stories over the last few months, Rob and I, where police have really been enjoying taking to Twitter and tweeting out comical stories. I mean, they really are the bastions of comical local news stories now, really. So this is a story. A woman who phoned 999 to explain she was going to eat some chocolate hobnobs to help her sleep was just one of hundreds of call makers dealt with by Dorset police on a busy Friday night shift. I just want to read that again because even I'm having to take this in. A woman who phoned 999 to explain she was going to eat some chocolate hobnobs to help her sleep. Okay. The force shared live updates of every call to its 999 and 101 numbers over a 12-hour period, and they did this, listeners, to make the public aware of the volume and variety of calls. So it's an educational reason, really. The tweetathon, as they called it, took place between 4 p.m. on Friday and 4 a.m. on Saturday, and saw the force command centre handle nearly 500 calls to emergency 999 and 101 non-emergency lines. As well as receiving multiple reports of assaults, domestic violence, fights, thefts, and missing people, nothing funny about those, although there might be an episode title in there, the force also dealt with numerous inquiries that should not have been directed to the police. One person called 999 to report some traffic lights in Bournemouth that were stuck on red. Well, I don't know, that could be an emergency, couldn't it? I mean, it depends how dangerous the situation had got. Who do you call in that instance? I'm not really sure. I have been in that circumstance where there have been numerous people waiting at a traffic light, it's been on red, and at some point the lead car has to take the decision just to go because it's obvious that there's a fault. And I think I've been in that position before. I have to say it didn't occur to me to call 999. They were told the matter was not an emergency and they should contact their local council. A delivery driver called 999 after a customer took a photo of him after he delivered their takeaway. Always take a photo of that delivery driver just in case you find anything suspicious on that pizza. The call handler told him this was not an offence and passed the details to 101. A drunk woman in a pub in Bournemouth called police on 101 to report a man who was looking at her. She did not know the man, however she was advised it was not an offence to look at somebody. No, it's not, but we can understand women being afraid for their safety when they're out. But I don't know that you call emergency services over it. And a man called 999 to report he had caught a bus but there was no return bus, so he was stuck and did not have enough money for a train home. After being told it was not a police matter, he made a follow-up call and demanded police arrange an ambulance to transport him home. When told this would not be possible, he shouted and swore at the call handler. So not one, but 2 calls that evening. The Force Command Centre also dealt with several calls from people with mental health issues and some with dementia. One man in a care home called 999 after seeing some police on TV. Due to his dementia, he struggled to tell the difference between the programme and real life. Officers will speak to staff at the man's care home to ensure he is supported, Dorset Police said. And the fire service contacted police after finding a confused man on the A338 who said he'd woken up in a puddle and didn't know how he had got there. Well, nothing funny about dementia, I must say, but it's a real shame they don't go into detail about the woman, the insomniac woman, and the hobnobs. I don't know if hobnobs are proven to help you sleep, but I very much doubt it. Comments. KDub72 says people should be fined for non-emergency calls. Interesting idea. Don't know how practical it is, how you'd follow that through. Wycliffe Willie says, I was not aware that people were still being made with only one brain cell, apart from Corbyn, of course. Bournemouth is a rather conservative supporting area. I do hope that St Anne's has room for these time-wasting morons, except the poor chap with dementia, in brackets. Yes, it was important to point that out. Nottingham says, this woman clearly is a sandwich short of a picnic. Don't know which woman, could be multiple of these callers. These people making silly calls are time wasters and recharge accordingly. Don't know what you're talking about. Whilst their emergency services are dealing with hoax calls, someone who has a genuine emergency has to wait longer. Thank you, Nottingham, for stating the obvious. Okay. Next story here. This is from Amy, and Amy, look, Amy's one of our... She's a trooper. I mean, she has really submitted us so many stories and couldn't feature them all, but I have tried to pick out the very best ones. This is from the Nottinghamshire Live, which is a great paper. When I say a great paper, I mean a great paper because it seems to contain quite a few funny stories. It's by 2 journalists. It was too hard for one journalist to write this story. They had to bring in 2. It's Sally Eccleston and Adrian Troughton. Shopper banned from the range store in the country. Now, listeners will remember a few months ago I read that story about a man who'd received that rather threatening, aggressive letter from Waitrose telling him... John Lewis, telling him never to kind of darken their doorstep again because he'd bought a TV there and he'd kept returning the TV and he'd returned it sort of multiple times, always complaining about something to do with it, and they sent him a letter saying he wasn't allowed in any John Lewis or Waitrose, etc. I believe that was, I'm almost certain that was the company. That was a great story. This reminds me of that. So, a shopper has been banned from The Range store in the country. Now, disclosure here, I have to confess I have never been to The Range, and I don't know what it is. Derek Hewitt has been banned from every outlet belonging to the budget retailer after raising health and safety concerns. The company's head office wrote to him, telling him he wasn't welcome on the premises, and the letter claimed police would have the authority to enforce legal action if he tried to access one of the stores or car parks. Now, to tell somebody you're not allowed on a car park, that's something else. Derek, from Bradley in Staffordshire, was made subject to the ban after alleging that the company's store in Fenton was breaching health and safety regulations, reports Stoke-on-Trent Live. So the Nottinghamshire Live have lifted this from the Stoke-on-Trent Live. He said, the staff are given 15 minutes at the end of the day to tidy up the store. During the 15 minutes, the front door, the store's main fire escape, is locked. After witnessing this myself, I decided to confront the store manager about this. He denied it and smirked at me when I questioned him about it. We disagreed with one another about the situation, and he told me to get off his car park. I've also been informed that fire extinguishers in the store are covered, and this does not comply with the law. I have genuine concerns over the safety of the staff, and my concerns are just dismissed. Now, this man is the stereotype of Mr. Health and Safety. Unhappy with the response from the store manager, Derek rang the head office to complain. I was on the phone with head office for about 40 minutes. They assured me they would investigate my concerns, he added. I didn't hear anything for about 2 weeks. He then received information which implied the store would be investigating him rather than his complaint. Derek added, I rang and put in a data subject access request to find out what information they were holding about me, but I was told I was not entitled to it. Then I was sent a letter through a post which told me I was banned from every The Range store in the country and car parks. The letter sent to him states, "Please take this." Now, again, anybody who's seen Eyes Wide Shut, okay? Tom Cruise goes to the Somerton Mansion party after obtaining the secret password from a friend of his who is going to be playing there, right? And basically it turns out to be a kind of sex orgy, weird satanic thing. Tom Cruise is discovered there as being an imposter, leaves, and then curiosity gets the better of him and he goes back there in the daytime, back to the house. I don't really know why. And a man just walks up the driveway and passes him a note through the gate that says something along the lines of, desist in making all your inquiries, nothing good can come of them, and basically just warning him off. There's a nice brief summary of a key scene in Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick there. This reminds me of it because the letter he was sent just says, "Please note that, should you attempt to enter any of our stores or the car park in Stoke-on-Trent, this will constitute criminal trespass and you'll be asked to leave immediately. If you refuse, then the police will be called to enforce legal action." Now, after contacting officials to discuss the letter, Derek has been told his aggressive behaviour towards a member of staff was the reason behind his ban, which took effect in April. "He wasn't prepared to discuss it with me, and he was not prepared to hear my side," Derek said. "I have a thing about human rights, and I won't stand down." He's like the man, that man in China, just standing in front of the tanks, isn't he? Only in this instance, the tanks are the Range budget retailer who specialise in home, leisure and garden, I've discovered. Derek has since informed Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service of his health and safety concerns. There's one comment. Truthteller100 says, "Same in Nottingham. About time they had a visit from health and safety to shut them down until they listen. Complain on social media and they tell you after 3 messages that you're harassing them." So, if any of our listeners have health and safety concerns about the Range store, I suggest you call 999. Okay, this is a story, I believe, from Amy again. It's from inews.co.uk. Their tagline is Real Life News Lifestyle. Oh no, that isn't their tagline. Those are the tabs at the top. Yes, sorry, the tabs are Real Life News Lifestyle Sport Opinion. I genuinely thought their strapline was Real Life News Lifestyle Sport Opinion, which I think it should be. By Claudia Tanner, Friday the 21st of June. This is under their Real Life section. Pensioner 82 banned from wearing a bikini in her own home, or she'll face 2 years in prison or an unlimited fine. Yes, listeners, you heard that right. A woman, 82, has been banned from wearing a bikini in her own home. Let's explain why. An 82-year-old woman has been banned by her local council, no less, for wearing a bikini in her own home amid a planning dispute with her neighbour, who owns a nursery. Just take that in. Kay Crane received a community protection notice, otherwise known as a CPN, threatening her with legal action if she wore the garment while standing by the windows in her house. CPNs have an on-the-spot fine of £90 for a breach, which can rise up to £2,500 if the matter is taken to court. The order from Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council was later dropped, but Kay then received an antisocial behaviour injunction, otherwise known as an ASBI, ASBI, which is punishable with imprisonment of up to 2 years or an unlimited fine. She recently received another warning for standing in her garden in view of the nursery's children and staring into the property. So the image that is being conjured up here of an 82-year-old woman in a bikini standing in her doorway staring into a children's nursery. It follows a year-long dispute between the pensioner and the owner of a children's nursery next door over planning permission. The former model from Stockport told "It's essentially a spat between neighbours. I should be allowed to wear what I like in my own home. Of course, you should." However, the council maintains Kay has caused distress to the nursery's children, a claim which she denies. I very much doubt that. Young kids in nursery, they're very tolerant and they don't really care about these things. Are you telling me they're going to be upset by seeing a woman in a bikini in the distance? I'm not sure. Manifesto Club, I don't know who they are, says its latest research shows that these new style ASBO CPNs are being issued at record levels for trivial actions such as, in quotes, keeping chickens, overgrown vegetation, barking dogs, swearing, or feeding the birds. There's an episode title right there. The group which campaigns against the hyper-regulation of everyday life. Can I just say the hyper-regulation of everyday life is actually a very good episode title. Hyper-regulation. I like that word. 2 R's in it. Hyper-regulation. They have found through Freedom of Information requests that the number of orders issued by councils have risen by 58% since 2014 to 2015 to the year 2017-2018. The problems between Kay, the 82-year-old woman, and the owner of Heaton's Preschool and Day Nursery began when planning permission was granted for the change of use of the site from a residential dwelling to a daycare facility in March 2017. The nursery extended its playground in Disbury Road, Heaton, Mersey, and applied for retrospective permission from the council in November last year, requesting an increase from its authorised capacity from 34 children to 45, which is an increase of 11 children. Kay says she was shocked when a month before she received the CPN in force for a year from the date of issue, although she admits to arguing with nursery staff and builders. The children are too noisy for a quiet residential area, she says, and the nursery is right at the back of my garden. I have no privacy. That would be annoying. With the extension and then the playground, there have been builders all year making noise and burning rubbish. There's not enough space in the car park and visitors are blocking neighbours' drives every single day. Yes, that would really annoy me. She says a police officer knocked on her door after visiting the nursery owner who made a complaint for mediation. He was nice. He said he could see both sides, she says. Then a community protection officer from the council knocked on my door unannounced and told me I couldn't wear a bikini. Then I was given the CPN. I feel like I'm being persecuted because I've objected to having a nursery at the bottom of my garden. It's not right for the council to take sides like this. So, is the nursery speculating or accusing this woman of deliberately standing in her doorway wearing a bikini staring into the nursery to sort of intimidate and upset the children and staff until they kind of leave? Do they believe this is her way of trying to drive them out? I'm 82, I'm going to wear a bikini until you can't bear it anymore and just leave. It's odd. Stockport Council soon dropped the case, but shortly afterwards in December she was sent another letter from the authority issuing her with an ASB, which is designed to specifically deal with housing-related issues. This stated that she must not engage in behaviour with her neighbour that is likely to result in harassment, alarm or distress. Then in this year, April, she received a letter from the council to say she had breached the ASB terms by staring into the property next door and watching the children playing while stood in your bikini in view of the children. It also said she had played music at the rear of her garden, not a euphemism, at an unreasonable level, and had shouted she shouldn't be here to children playing. Okay, that you shouldn't do. And it threatened committal proceedings for further breaches. She says, I had removed a tarpaulin, a large sheet that was on the nursery's fence because it looked ugly, which I know I shouldn't have done. I should have just complained, said Kay. But I've only had Talk Sport on in the garden. I'm a Manchester United fan. I've not been playing loud music. I haven't shouted at any children. I said you shouldn't be here to a staff member. During hot spells I sometimes wear my bikini out in the garden. I have a right to do that. The letter bringing up the bikini again is confusing because the CPM related to that was meant to be dropped. The injunction is frightening me because with that I could be jailed for wearing my bikini in my own home. A Stockport Council spokesperson says this particular case has caused a great deal of alarm and distress to the very young children at the nursery in question. We have tried to work with Mrs. Crane as much as possible, and whilst wearing a bikini is not a breach of the undertaking agreed in court, staring at the children, shouting at the children, and watching the children whilst wearing a bikini in full view are some of the repeated behaviours that have caused concern and are classed as a breach of the undertaking. You really couldn't get a more quintessentially local news story than this. If you want to know these CPN things that she was issued, some of the other examples have been North Warwickshire Council, who issued one targeting a dilapidated shed. Hastings Council ordered a person to take down a handwritten poster criticising the council. You can't do that! You cannot do that. We're not in North Korea. 32 councils used CPNs against the homeless. Lovely. I bet they were Tory. And North Hertfordshire Council issued a CPN ordering someone not to sit on the floor. This story here is from the Liverpool Echo. Submitted to Local Anesthetic Podcast by Steve, long-time listener, regular contributor. It's from the Liverpool Echo by Rebecca Conscienzi, I think. Mum slams families eating picnics at theme parks, saying they suck enjoyment out of life. Right. A mum has slammed families who take a packed lunch to theme parks, saying they're sucking enjoyment out of life. She said she thought it was, in quotes, sad, seeing people eat sandwiches out of foil, and that she didn't, in quotes, want that kind of life. Well, you don't have to have that kind of life. You know... But this, I really do believe in live and let live. What is it to you with what people are eating? The controversial opinion hit all the wrong notes with fellow parents, who in turn savagely replied to her on Mumsnet. User Ribrob said, I went to a theme park with a friend recently, fully prepared to buy lunch. When I was there, however, I arrived to pick her up, and she was there with a bag full of homemade sandwiches and packets of crisps each. I was grateful, of course, for the time and money on her part, but I couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. What's the harm in buying food out? It's always been the case that I can't help but feel a little sad when I see families on a day out at a theme park, or a zoo, for example, sat on a bench eating warm, sandwiches wrapped in foil with a fruit shoot. I agree with her about the fruit shoot. They really are disgusting, and I do not retract that one bit. Full of sweetness. I had the type of childhood where this was commonplace. Packed lunch for every occasion. No need to eat out because there was food at home or it was too expensive, despite us having no money worries, etc. So I suppose it kind of stuck with me, and I don't want that kind of life. So she's carrying sort of the burden of these childhood issues, whereby, you know, she was forced to eat packed lunches all the time, and now she wants to stop everybody else eating packed lunches. She says, am I being unreasonable to think that if you can afford out a day at the zoo, etc., then spending a little bit of extra on some food is no big deal? And to think life is just too short to spend time making a sandwich or salad to take on a day out, when you could really just spend a little bit of extra money and have the hassle taken away? It seems so strange to me, as though people try and suck all the enjoyment out of life. But people did think she was being unreasonable, and pointed out the many reasons why. One said, we can only afford trips to the zoo because we have taken packed lunch with us. Just because you can afford the extras doesn't mean everyone else can. You are being unreasonable. A second said, maybe your culinary skills aren't up to scratch, but there is nothing better than a lovely homemade picnic. The cheap and nasty fare found at theme parks, etc., doesn't compare to a homemade sandwich. Another said, that's a weird perspective. There's plenty of joy in a day out, even with a packed lunch. I don't get your point of view, but you're entitled to it. Just don't expect anyone to share it. Another said, theme park food plays havoc with your waistline and often isn't healthy. And another added, and lots of people can't afford it. So what? Those who can't should just stay at home and never go anywhere. Those living frugally or within their means don't deserve to go anywhere fun. You sound like a snob. But there were a handful who agreed it was part of the experience to eat at the theme park or the zoo. One said, I agree, it's all part of the day out. End of story. Now, that is again a story that could only be featured in a local newspaper. J Liverpool says, how come the Echo are very selective about what articles you can comment on? Why not on all topics? We can comment on this rubbish, but not something like the kid falling through the roof of the baths. Don't know what that's about, but it sounds interesting. P.O. says, stupid woman, remember being a kid with jam butties and a bottle of water. Not everything is about money. Teach kids that money isn't everything. Moveman says, bottle of Robinson's, made up juice, spam sarnies on Sunblest bread, Golden Wonder, Waggon Wheels, coach going to Blackpool lights and no stabbings. Good days. Now, I want to read that again because I think this could be poem of the year. I'm going to read it, okay, as a poem. Bottle of Robinson's, made up juice. Spam sarnies on Sunblest bread. Golden Wonder, Waggon Wheels. Coach going to Blackpool, lights and no stabbings. Good days. I think you should enter that into some kind of poetry competition that really does sort of sum up the state of Britain. Ben Jones, 1980, says, another copy and paste from Mumsnet. Hey, Rebecca, pathetic. Grumpy in Work says, Rebecca, referring to the journalist here, the queen of rubbish stories, never fails to up with rubbish now on a daily basis. I blame the editor for allowing such tripe to be printed. It's interesting, isn't it, this hostility towards journalists, which normally, you know, I don't mind, but since sort of Trump and these Farage rallies and people booing journalists, you know, I don't know if you can call these people journalists, but the point is, I don't know, there's something a bit nasty about these. Fuming Scouser says, is this what the Echo seriously thinks of its readers? They want to read rubbish like this? Each week you think it can't get any worse, and then they pull this out the bag. Dear me. I guess that is what they think Liverpool deserves. Okay. This is a story from Helen. It's from the Plymouth Live. It's by Jamie Hawkins. This is a bizarre story if ever there was one, okay? This could be contender for most pointless story of the year. Unhappy man hit by car wasn't actually unhappy at all. Okay. A Plymouth man who was run over by a car insists he was not angry at all after the incident. Whilst walking home from work on Tuesday afternoon, the carpenter was struck by a car while crossing Charles Street, which broke his ankle. At the time, a police spokesperson told Plymouth Live that the man was ranting and raving at the driver of the vehicle and flailing his arms about, and we updated the live blog accordingly. However, the man who wished to remain anonymous set the record straight about what actually happened and said a fight broke out on the other side of the street, which was a complete coincidence. He said, I was coming back from work and crossed the road about 5:20 p.m. on Charles Street near Primark. I'm a carpenter, so I was wearing my high-vis jacket. I was crossing the road, which had the pedestrian green light. I was walking halfway across the road when suddenly I was hit and ended up on the floor. The driver got out straight away to help me, others got out to help, one was the medic, which was lucky, and they all helped me get to the crossing. The drama didn't end there, however, as a fight broke out on the other side of the road. A couple of minutes after I got hit, a couple of guys started arguing, he said. This was completely separate. They started fighting, like a full-on punch-up. This kind of thing's a regular occurrence in Plymouth. Then a woman grabbed one of their phones and started smashing it before security from Primark, I believe, got involved. Brilliant. The man was quick to play down reports. He was angry about the incident and decided not to press charges and admitted he was lucky to have just broken an ankle. He said at about 9:30 p.m. that night I had a call from a police officer who asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't. It was an accident. These things happen. I was told the woman who hit me had been driving for 30 years and hadn't had any accidents, and she wasn't used to driving in the area, and so was kind of confused. Luckily, I was wearing work boots as the car drove over my foot. It could have been a lot worse. I could see why police got confused about the two incidents. To be honest, I was surprised what was happening across the road. So the angry man is not angry after all. That's the end of that story. Gazboy says the lack of sentence construction and errors in the first paragraph caused me not to bother with the rest of the story. Sort it out, Plymouth Live, and only employ literate journalists, please. See, more journalist bashing. The lack of sentence construction and errors in the first paragraph is a very good episode title. And Dawes says, ran a red light, confused because not local, wasn't aware we had different light system to everywhere else, which I believe is his attempt at trying to be humorous. Okay, well, it's normally this time each week where, it's our listener story of the week, but every story has been a listener story, and I've gone and saved the best for last here. It's by Alex Finnis from Tuesday, June the 18th. This was submitted by Amy. Jersey is being terrorised by a 100-strong gang of feral chickens, waking up locals and chasing joggers. Jersey residents have been making complaints about chickens, which have also become a traffic hazard. 2 small culls have been carried out, but they continue to cause chaos, the Environment Minister has admitted. So hang on a minute, you've got these feral chickens waking up locals, damaging gardens and chasing joggers, apparently. And residents have complained about the birds, and the council has carried out 2 small culls. Wow. It is believed the chickens were once pets, which were abandoned before rapidly breeding. They now roam the British island in 100-strong groups. A chicken gang. Or a hen party. There are no foxes in Jersey, which means the chickens are running around unchecked without a natural predator. You see, the people who complain about foxes understand they're part of the natural ecosystem. We need them to kill feral chickens. Environment Minister John Young said, we are now dealing with very large numbers. The culls that happened were quite modest. We're in a situation where we've got animal lovers on the one hand, and where we have got those who are experiencing a nuisance on the other. I can't pretend to sit here and say I've got an answer to that. A total of 35 chickens were killed in the first 2 culls, carried out by a private pest controller. Mr Young said his department has received 40 complaints about the birds so far this year. Local authorities on the island say they are fighting a tough battle and have urged people not to feed the chickens as it encourages them to breed. William Peggy, Director of Environment for the States, said don't know what that means, said efforts to come up with a plan to tackle the issue had been hampered by the loss of the state's vet, but with an interim replacement now appointed, discussions could take place to find a practical solution. Sorry, I'm confused. Where the fuck is this again? Jersey. No, I've been to Jersey before. Strange place. So basically, he's saying they've lost their vet, the one and only vet on the island. He added that they did not know where and when people were abandoning chickens, making it hard to crack down on it. Under nuisance legislation, landowners are able to dispatch chickens if they're causing a nuisance, he said, and action could be taken if a feral chicken was being fed in a way that causes a nuisance. How do you feed a chicken in a way that causes a nuisance? Feral chickens are not protected under the animal welfare law because they do not belong to anybody. So there you go, everybody. Feral chickens not protected by anybody. You can do what you want. And out of nowhere, that is the end of the story. And on that note, bring this shorter episode of Local Anaesthetic to a close. Look forward with a mixture of eager anticipation, yet trepidation, of course, to our next episode. And I really do look forward to listening to it because Rob will be recording his own episode, and I've got no idea what it's going to be. So I'm going to be listening to it as a listener, just like all of you, and I can't wait for that. But yeah, we do bring this episode to a close, and we move ever more forward to our next episode. Just like as we move ever more forward to our next episode, like what's wrong with me? How is it that I can't even remember my own stories? Like a man being hit by a car, very unfortunately, being knocked to the ground, it being falsely and maliciously reported actually in local news blogs that he was angry after the incident and got involved in a punch-up, but contacting the local paper to clarify, no, it's okay, I'm not angry at all. Just like that, we move ever more forward to our next episode, which will be episode 280. A Rob special. Now, we can be found on our website, lapodcast.net. From there, you can download all of our previous episodes. There is a donate button in the top right-hand corner. If you feel like donating to this podcast, it would really help us. You can do that via PayPal. It's easy to do. We are on Spotify. We are, if you search for us on any kind of podcast app, search for LA Podcast or Local Anaesthetic Podcast will come up. Subscribe to us from there, leave us a review. All the episodes now are automatically uploaded to YouTube. If you'd like to listen that way, you can subscribe there as well, leave a comment, do whatever. And of course from Facebook, facebook.com/LA Podcast, and Twitter at LA Podcast. And we can be contacted via all those ways. If you want to submit us a story, if you want to get featured on this podcast and you can see the quality of the stories listeners have submitted, then do drop us an email to lapodcast.net@gmail.com. That's lapodcast.net@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can post it on Facebook or tweet it to us. So yes, by the time this episode goes out, I assume, maybe not, Rob will either be packing to go to Canada or in Canada, and I'm sure everybody hopes that he gets better soon. And we will all look forward to his solo effort. I hope you can top this, mate. God bless, and keep it local.